Californians love to say that their vote doesn't count because California is just going to be blue anyway. But if you had to guess, if just 10% of non-voters in California decided to show up to the polls, how many California House seats would flip? I'll give you a hint. There are 52 total House seats. Comment your guesses now and welcome to My Vote Doesn't Count. I'll tell you the answer at the end. But first, let's start off with the presidential election because that's the one that people normally talk about. The presidential election in California is pretty freaking safe compared to pretty much any other election in America. Joe Biden won by 63.48% and the voter turnout is 80.67%, which is damn good. But while the presidential election in California is pretty safe, that's really all that Californians typically vote in. For reference, the voter turnout for the governor election in 2022 was only 50%. But what does that really mean? After all, Gavin Newsom got almost 60% of the vote. That's pretty safe, right? No, not at all. It would only take 23.1% of registered Republicans who didn't show up to the polls to flip California red. Almost everyone in California knows at least 4 Republicans who didn't show up to the polls. And if just one of those Republicans decided to show up, then Gavin Newsom wouldn't be the governor right now. California is not nearly as safe as people want to believe it is. When we look at the Senate race, the same thing applies here. In 2022, our boy Alex Padilla won with 61.06%, which is pretty good, but the voter turnout rate was only 25%. That's right, only 25% of eligible voters voted for the Senate in California. Compare that to the turnout of the presidential vote, which was almost 81%. That means if just 1 out of every 5 Republican voters who stayed home decided to come to the polls, California would have flipped red. While California is extremely secure for the presidential vote, Democratic voters don't really vote anywhere else. And if you're in California and you really care about how the country operates, you want the House of Representatives to be blue too. And if you're in California, you have the most seats in the House out of any state in the country. And you are not ready to see what the numbers for the House of Representatives look like. Because even though California has much less gerrymandering than most other states, compared to their presidential elections, California's House is disproportionately conservative. Why is that? Well, that's because areas like District 13 have 16% voter turnout, which means the Democrats just didn't feel like coming. And because of that turnout, less than 0.1% of non-voters could have flipped this blue. And as you can tell by this spreadsheet behind me, that's not the only district that's like that. In fact, you can see here that all of the Republican districts are like that. District 22, less than 0.5% of non-voters could have flipped it blue. District 45, less than 2% of voters could have flipped it blue. District 41, same, less than 2% of non-voters could have flipped it blue. District 27, 2% of non-voters could have flipped it blue, and the list goes on. So now back to the main question. If just 10% of registered voters in California who didn't show up to the polls decided to actually vote,